is Naive Libertarian Politics, and today we'll be doing episode 7 of the History of the Republican Party series. This episode will be in the fifth party system. It will be covering the second half of the Dark Age for the Republican Party. It'll be covering up to 1948. It'll be focusing a lot on World War II and Thomas Dewey, which we'll get into in a second. So yeah, let's get straight into it. So first we have the fifth party system article, like we always do, to show which party system we're in. And so we're going to go to the military history of the United States. The United States joined World War II in 1941, and that was right after, where we left off, about a year after Wendell Willkie. He lost the election considerably bad. It was when the Republicans kind of abandoned their principles and they chose Wendell Willkie, who was basically just a Democrat. And FDR, he'd been doing very well. He'd been doing very well in elections in 1936, in 1940, and in 1932. And you see, 1940. I'm gonna go back to 1940, and actually Thomas Dewey, he was a up and coming person. They chose Wendell Willkie for no real reason. It was a very weird nomination, primaries. They went with Thomas Dewey, who at this time in 1940 he was 38. He was an isolationist, which was really unheard of, or it was unpopular since the war had started. Well, it currently was not. In 1940 it was not unpopular, but by the 1940s, and a little bit in 1940, it was unpopular. That's mostly why they went with Wendell Willkie and not Thomas Dewey. Also, Robert Taft, he was another isolationist. He also did not win. And Thomas Dewey, he was an isolationist. He did not want to go to war. At least in 1940, he did not. But as you see, 1944 come around, he becomes an internationalist. He wants to go to war. He wants to go and fight. He wants America to join the war, and he wants to ramp up the war efforts. Partially because he's grown. I mean, he's still relatively young for a politician. He'd be 42, I believe, by then. And you have Thomas Dewey, Douglas MacArthur. So you might recognize him. It was a very funny. When I noticed, it was very interesting. I thought it was very interesting, and he even won a plurality of the votes. If he had only won, he could have, become president, which was it'd be an interesting sight. But it's a little bit of a tangent. Thomas Dewey. They chose Thomas Dewey in 1944. Excuse me. And he wanted to ramp up the war effort. He wanted to continue the war. And he was older. He became relatively popular, and he basically became the face of the Republican Party. In 1944, he ran against FDR, and he lost. He lost handily. Another landslide for FDR, and this would be FDR's last election. He would go on to die in 1945. He would be remembered as one of the greatest presidents, but in my opinion, he was not really that great. He did some pretty bad things, internment, and things like that. And by 1948, he had basically become the king of the Republican Party. There was no way he couldn't win, even though he didn't win the plurality of the votes or the plurality of the contests in each state. He was chosen, and he was chosen for the Republican primary. He ran. He had become basically the face of the Republican Party by now. He was much more dominant in politics, and he had some spites with Robert Taft, who basically was the face of the paleoconservative anti-war movement. He would become basically the face of the Republican Party, running against Dwight Eisenhower. And you can see that 1948 comes around, and it was predicted that Dewey would win handily, or that he would win in a huge victory. and you can see he did not win. Yeah. He would. Dewey was an interesting character. He managed over the course of 8 years to become basically the Republican Party. And it wasn't as much as the Republican Party followed him. It's more that he changed his policies a little so that he would follow the Republican Party, and he became the face of the Republican Party because of that, because he was willing to change. Which is it's interesting. It's an interesting thought. You don't see a lot of people like that. A lot of you could say he's not very principled, but he was young. He was still politically developing, and um, he would he would become forgotten to history, you could say, but he was very influential in the 40s. He was basically the face of the Republican Party. Yeah, and what you can take away from this episode is that in uh, in in the second half of the Republican Dark Age, as I like to call it, in the 1940s, um, the Republican Party was still not doing very well. They could not win, but they they decided they moved to become more moderate, which still exists to this day. To become more moderate, rhinos. They weren't really called rhinos back then, but they became very moderate, and because of that, Thomas Dewey became basically the face of the Republican Party. He became the Republican king, and while he would never win the Republican nomination again, he would start. He would become the face of the Republican movement of internationalism or globalism, I guess you could say, that would stay with the Republican Party for years on end and would not go away. Has not even gone away yet, which is a pretty interesting thing. Pretty interesting thought to have in your mind. So yeah, as always, this is just my opinion. Take everything with a grain of salt. My name is Naive Libertarian Politics, so you take that with a grain of salt. Everything I say. Expect a video to come tomorrow. I've been making videos relatively every day. I should be able to start making videos every day again. Expect a new prediction video to come out soon, in a couple days, as June comes rolling around. Expect more videos to come in this series. Yeah. So yeah. Thank you for watching. Make sure to like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.